I guess that's my cue. Welcome, everybody. I'm so happy to see so many smiling faces, some of them familiar, some of them new to me. My name's Ari Shapiro. I am one of the board members of SMYAL. My pronouns are he, him. And on behalf of the entire team tonight, I want to thank you for joining us for yet another Zoom event that may be one of the last ones we do as we're all getting vaccinated and going out into the world. But the great thing about being able to do these is that we can invite people who might not be able to be here if we were doing them in person in Washington, and that is certainly true of tonight's guests. But before I introduce them, I just want to thank everybody who is either an existing major donor or a prospective major donor for the generous support you've given that has allowed SMYAL to expand our programming over the years and thrive even and especially in the last year of economic uncertainty and pivoting during the pandemic. You have made it possible for us to continue to support LGBTQ youth in the greater DC area and beyond. So, as tonight's program unfolds, we are going to be taking questions from all of you, and so feel free to put them in the chat. And if you don't know how to use the chat feature on your screen, then I don't know what you've been doing this entire pandemic. We've been using Zoom for a year. It's time for you to figure it out. Tonight, we have a bunch of special guests that I'm excited to introduce you to, including podcast hosts Jon Lovett and Aida Osman from Crooked Media, who I'm going to tell you a little bit more about in just a moment. But we're also going to hear from SMYAL Director of Youth Development and Community Engagement, Adelphi Johnson, who is a superstar in her own right. Our Executive Director, Sultan Shaker. By the way, if you look up YouTube videos, you will find 12 different ways of pronouncing his name. It is pronounced Shaker. And you're going to see a special video featuring participants in our program Little Smiles, along with some of their family members, which is moving and exciting. And I can't wait for you to learn more about it. So to kick us off, we are so fortunate to be joined by two guests who host some of the most popular podcasts that are not produced by NPR. One of the founders of Crooked Media, a great old friend of mine, Jon Lovett, hosts Save America and Lovett or Leave It. Before that, he was a speechwriter for President Obama and Hillary Clinton. He was also a Hollywood writer on the shows 1600 Penn and The Newsroom. Jon, it is so good to have you here.
Good to see you, Ari. Thanks for having me.
You too. And also Aida Osman, who is a comedian, actress, and writer. She hosts Crooked Media's Keep It, and she was recently a story editor for HBO's program Betty. She was a writer on Netflix's Big Mouth. She is currently working on a show called Rap Shit, which is a comedy series being developed for HBO Max. So good to have you here, Aida.
Such a pleasure. Hello, everyone. I'm honored to be here.
So, as I said, if you have questions for Jon and Aida, please put them in the chat. And meanwhile, I'm curious for both of you, like you started these podcasts during the Trump administration. As the whole country has been pivoting, how have the two of you been pivoting the way you approach your job in this kind of new political reality?
I mean, I no longer have a political reality. I don't have to talk about that man anymore. So I've noticed that at my podcast, which, focuses mostly on pop culture and the intersections with politics. Now we just don't be intersecting with politics that much. We talk about Biden every once in a while, but I've noticed that we've been able to reshift our focus and talk about maybe like more local and state level politics instead of constantly having to harp on Trump. It has been refreshing to say the least. But now we can get into the important things like Lil Nas ripping his pants on SNL and Demi Lovato being non-binary. The things I really want to talk about.
Totally. I was telling some people in our newsroom that I feel like for the first time in 5 years, we're not just dogs chasing squirrels. We're not just reacting to everything. We can actually sort of think about what we want to cover and how. Jon?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's amazing how quickly you forget how you've obviously, I think we all carry a lot of hard memories of the past 4 years and certainly the past year. But when you're not in it, it's different to remember something and actually be in it. And I think, in the worst days of the Trump years, a phrase I'm using for the first time today, and I may never use again, was that what will get me through it was this idea of this is not just about stopping something very, very bad, which it was obviously. But it was about putting ourselves in a position to, for the first time in a long time, be thinking not just about the horrible things we're trying to avert, but some actually good work that we could do. And it's been really exciting having that to talk about. I do think one of the challenges now, and I think Aida hit on it, I think Ari hit on it, it's that, okay, politics is a bit boring again and requires a bit more nuance than it did before. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Things should be more boring. at the national level. But the underlying conditions that led to someone like Trump taking power, the anti-democratic, fervor that has taken hold of the right wing, the attacks on the free press, the assault on just truth and the ability to like have a shared set of facts, like those are the larger kind of foundational problems that allowed Trump to rise, and they are not better. They are exactly as they were. And so I think what we are trying to do because we're talking about politics is all right, let's have that nuanced conversation about what's actually happening inside the Biden administration, but let's keep our eyes on the prize, right? Like actually it was Jason Isbell, the singer, who said this, and it was said so well. He said, "We didn't dodge a bullet, we dodged a boomerang." And we have to remember that like,
is that a lyric, like, or did he just say that?
I don't know if he invented that.
Okay, so
stuck with me.
Jumping
it's
off
giving
of that,
it's giving Taylor Swift, first of all. It's giving Taylor
very
Swift
much so.
I don't know.
So how do both of you think about the audience that you're speaking to, whether it's pop culture or politics or the intersection of them? Like, are you fangirls talking to fangirls? And I use that in a non-gendered way. Are you sort of, preachers preaching to the choir? Or are you trying to appeal to people who might be a little creeped out by the Lil Nas X video, or might think that 5G is trying to control our brain with a microchip, or like whatever the thing may be? How do you strike that balance? How do you think about the audience you're speaking to?
I think there's a big space between the people who think there's 5G in the vaccine and
and
the choir
comparison.
And the choir. So I think it's not there is no, there's the choir, and then there's the people who sit in the front pews, and then there's people who come to the church every once in a while, and there's people who come to the church every 4 years, and there's people that have never been in the church. And like what we did over the last 4 years, I think, is we helped people move up the ladder. So, and I think the crisis of the past 4 years helped make this possible. But of course, the idea is basically, there are people who didn't vote that became voters. There are voters who became voters and donators. There are donators who became door knockers. There are door knockers who became incredible activists. There are incredible activists who ran for office. And like, there are people that kind of moved up that ladder of participation. And our job now is to keep the people who participated participating, because we have an incredibly important, there's elections, there's local elections going on all the time. There's incredibly important midterm elections coming up. And so I think one of the lessons of the last 4 years and of the Obama years is it's not elections. We have to do the work in between the elections and keep people engaged in the fight, even if the acute threat of Trump is gone.
Aida, how do you think about this? Because pop culture can be such a gateway drug to political issues that might be unpalatable as political issues. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, well, first of all, there is 5G in the vaccine. First of all, my Lord and Savior Carrie Hilson will attest to that. If you listen to the podcast, I'm famously the only Black woman in QAnon. So I'm joking. I mostly want to say though that like, I think especially with Keep It, we have a healthy distrust of everything, especially any establishment. So but within that, at the same time, we are super fans. So we can talk about the Oscars and our level of fanaticism for it. We can talk about how unfair it is when someone like Eddie Redmayne gets an Oscar nomination for a movie, The Danish Girl, where he's portraying a trans woman. Like, that we can have these conversations, but still be like, but that movie, the coloring, that was beautiful. Like, we have nuanced conversations. And I think that makes it easier for people to be able to see both sides of the coin. I get a lot of DMs from people who are mad at something I said, or like whatever my Keep It is, whatever I'm disliking. It's usually something banal like a Taylor Swift album or a Olivia Rodrigo song, but it'll turn into a conversation about how they shouldn't. I can give them information about how they have no place to be judging me and my opinions because they don't come from the community that I come from. Oh, girl, yes.
Really? Wow.
I have time. I work multiple jobs, but I have time. I've started to lessen my communication with those people, but I still want to help. I still want to help and provide a different opinion. But yes.
I want to remind people that if you have questions for Jon and Aida, put them in the chat. And if I approve of them, I will ask them. And if I don't, I'll pretend not to see them. Right now, it feels like Republicans in so many states across the country are choosing trans youth as the target of their political energy. And we're seeing so many states trying to pass these laws that are anti-trans and specifically anti-trans youth. Do both of you, either of you, have any insight into why that is the particular thing that we're seeing right now?
I mean, it's the they lost on marriage equality, and no one seems to say, well, hold on a second, you said all of this would crumble around us. And that didn't happen. Well, it almost did, but nobody blames the gays. We weren't responsible. But I don't think it's that complicated. I think the polling shows them that this is a place where there's still a lot of people who are learning about trans people. They don't know trans people. Trans people have not had the same exposure that gay people have had. That really made a difference. There were two polls side by side, and I'm thinking about this. One of them was, I believe, conducted by Politico, and it actually was really grim. It showed really grim numbers about when you ask people about trans participation in sports. And then what was interesting is I think Human Rights Campaign did another survey that gave people information about trans athletes, and then the numbers really shifted. And what it told me is that there's a lot of people out there that are still carrying prejudices or had some uncertainty or just some questions, and they come at the question with some fear and anxiety. But when you give them information, you give people insight into that, let them talk through their issues. On the other side of it, they're much more supportive of trans athletes. And so what I think is going on is a similar thing that happened in 2004, which is this is the last chance to use this kind of bigotry to win elections and enshrine bigotry into the law. They will do that. In some places they will succeed, in some places they will fail. And then over the years that follow, the country will continue moving, and these things will be a terrible legacy. And the question is, how much of this can we stop before they're able to successfully use it at the local level? And those are the fights that are ongoing.
I'm old enough to remember when, Will and Grace or My So-Called Life were like these revolutionary shows that depicted gay people just as it felt like the country was mobilizing against gay people. And it feels like now, for the first time in pop culture and media, we have real representations of trans people in three-dimensional ways, whether that's like Pose or Transparent or Veneno, which, by the way, if folks haven't watched it, the best thing streaming today, Veneno, HBO Max, go watch it. And yet we're seeing this backlash against trans people, just as there suddenly is, at least through media, a representation of trans people in most Americans' lives. I don't know, Aida, does that seem like a coincidence to you? Do you think there's
No, I think there's a direct correlation. Like, as trans rights become a larger conversation, to me, it feels like a malicious step in the process that is almost necessary, which is that, like, if you pay attention to what trans hate crimes and the numbers that we're seeing now in America, they're on the rise. It's because once you talk about the elephant in the room, people suddenly decide they're very scared of the elephant and they have to do something to hurt the elephant instead of just leaving the room. Yeah. So I feel like this is something that we even saw in the suffragette movement in the 1920s, and we saw the Black Power movement in the 1960s, where the second you decide that a marginalized class of people deserve rights, the most vocal, fee, fi, fo, fum, here the bigots come, it almost feels necessary. And I can only hope that we move past this era as quickly as possible and get to the part where we can all just live comfortably with each other.
So you're both in Los Angeles. Many of the people here tonight are in Washington, D.C. These are like big, wealthy, liberal cities where—
That's my home, sorry. Columbia Heights.
What role do you think people who are concerned about these issues but are not living in places where they're actively happening can and should be playing right now?
It's a good question. I mean, I don't know the answer. I mean, I think one thing is just support organizations that are doing good work on the ground, right? I mean, that's one of the most important things we can do, which is the trans, I believe it's the Trans Justice Funding Project. Basically, you donate to them, and then they actually go and find local organizations that are doing the work in the places that are fighting these legal fights. And I think those are like a really good thing to do. I think it's really hard, but yeah, I wish I had some grand other thought on what people can do locally beyond that. I mean, other than just living by our values and upholding our values and showing people that trans people are nothing to be afraid of, and continue to make the argument, because a lot of culture, a lot of politics, a lot of our culture emanate from Washington, and they emanate from Los Angeles, and that has power, that has value. I mean, conservatives get it. That's why they hate it. That's why they talk about it all the time.
Aida, what do you think?
I mean, just think about the way our government works, where something doesn't get handled at the federal level or the national level, you know, so on and so forth, all the way to municipal and school. If you can't make change and you can't affect change on a grander scale, remember that you still have relationships and interpersonal change that you can enact. Like, let's say you see someone like me who is a trans person, but is femme presenting and non-binary. What you can do is educate yourself in all the ways that are accessible to you, so that you're mindful when you speak to new people, as not to offend them and as not to step all over their gender or make assumptions about them. Just like Jon was saying about holding on to your values, it's also expanding your own horizons and maybe checking yourself and saying, like when I walked into the room, did you think I was a trans person? Maybe some of you didn't. Maybe some of you didn't know to ask yourself those questions. So it's really about reflecting and changing. We're getting all corny. Changing from within so that you can make other people feel comfortable. And ultimately, that's what this is all about. It's about empathy. So,
well said. Let's take a couple of the questions from the chat. The first one from Hansi says, Aida, you mentioned Demi Lovato coming out as non-binary. What do you think the impact of stars like them coming out has on young people and representation of non-binary folks, especially coming from such a major pop star?
It's a win. I don't want it to be a win, but it's unfortunately a win. I mean,
why don't you want it to be a win? Wait. First of all, Demi Lovato, like, I have my own other personal things about her. The thing is, I'm still a black about them. Sorry. Of all the people to be misgendering non-binary people. My feelings about Demi Lovato is that I'm excited about them coming out. What I'm more excited about is for people who are people of color to get to have that level of a platform when these things happen. And until then, it's hard to celebrate those things, but I still take it as a win ultimately. It's important. It's important. If I had seen someone like Demi Lovato when I was a child, it would have been much more accessible for me to say, I think I too am genderqueer. Yeah. So again, a win. Okay. Next question I think is for Jon, although it's not specified, so either of you could answer. We heard a lot at one time about the lasting Trump impacts and backsliding on civil rights because of judicial appointments. Where are we really today? Will we still feel impacts from that, and where? You know,
it's a really good question. I mean, the answer is yes. I had a conversation with Dre McKesson about this, about the number of investigations into police departments. I believe, I may get this a little bit wrong, but basically there were only before the Trump administration in a given year, there typically were only like 3. And in the Trump administration, there really were none. Like, there was a lot of work that the Justice Department should have been doing that just didn't happen, first of all. The other thing is, I mean, we always like to talk about the courts in like the present tense, like with a gerund, like we're fighting for the courts, we are losing the courts. We lost the Supreme Court. We lost it. It's a huge, huge loss. It's terrible. It will have lasting ramifications. We will face terrible consequences for it. I think sometimes we don't like to say those things because it feels like nothing much to do, but like, we should just be honest about it. Like, we lost the courts up and down, and now there's an opportunity. The Biden administration is moving fast to try to get judges on the court, but that will have lasting ramifications. There's tons of cases that will never reach the Supreme Court that will be decided by a Trump appointee. So I think that is real and lasting damage. I do think that winning this election, like, I think the damage that Trump would have done in 2 terms was 10x, not 2x, what he could do in 1 term. Like, our ability to kind of get back certain, like, to repair some of the norms and value and institutions, I think was really important. You know, I think back to what I said earlier, I think that like these midterm elections are a real test. Like, we really have to kind of defy some historical averages in these midterms. Like, if saying Democrats, like, historically the party that controls the White House loses seats in the midterms, and Democrats have no margin to lose seats and can retain control. We have to look. I just, for the sake of NPR, want to be clear that when you say we, I'm not part of that we. I'm the interviewer. You're not part of the we. I affirm you. You're not using the we, and no. That's great. Go for it. I'm a different we. Like, a lot of also what's happening right now, you know, you have this negotiation going on over, like, I mean, it gets really nuts and bolts, but over this infrastructure bill, over this family plan, we have 500, and except for Ari, have 500 days, roughly 500 days to protect people's votes and earn people's votes. 500 days. And if we do that, we can, there's nothing is written that says we have to lose the House. If we can demonstrate to people that the Democratic majority really did deliver, change that people
George W. Bush won seats after 9/11. I mean, in his first midterm.
Yes, George W. Bush, yes, but like, it was an exception because of
right
9/11. And so, and by the way, one thing that, there's this idea that like after 9/11, we were all Americans. Everyone in politics was conservative. That's what happened. That's what brought the country together. They all became conservatives for a while. I think like we have this very limited window to pass the For the People Act, or at the very least, the Jon Lewis Voting Rights Act, to pass some more legislation that'll really show people that a Democratic majority is delivering for them. And then I'll say, okay, like we've made it out of this. Again, like what I said earlier, we didn't dodge a bullet, we dodged a boomerang, and we have it's coming back around.
Let's take one more question from the chat, and then I've got a lightning round for you. Okay, for Michael Barber, the question is, the challenge now is the abundance of media choices, fragmentation, and algorithms. Netflix or HBO Max isn't going to show Black, brown, trans, or other content depicting marginalized societies to middle America based on what they are and aren't consuming. Representation is one of the most powerful ways we can impact change. And when a group of people can't see people who aren't the same as them, they can't emphasize, I think that was supposed to be empathize. How do we change that? Aida, you want to take that one?
Yikes. This is a very difficult question for me as a Black Nebraskan, because I do know that this is not
But
just,
I thought you said Columbia Heights.
I'm both, girl.
Okay.
I was born in Columbia Heights, but grew up in Nebraska and was kind of back and forth. But ultimately, I know this is a problem because Black and brown media didn't reach me in Nebraska. Like, I was watching Three's Company and like thought I was Jack Tripper. That is probably why I'm a comedian now. It's difficult. It's difficult to access those worlds. I think though that it's something that we can celebrate, regardless of mainstream programming like Netflix and HBO Max, two places I work at. So you're making this difficult for me. But the internet exists, and as a young person, I was raised by the internet, and I found refuge and solace in going on Tumblr and going on Pinterest and finding a representation that looks like me. The people who need to find the representation will ultimately be drawn to it like a moth to a flame. The difficulty now is what you're saying. It's going to continue to be a problem. How do we get people to stop watching, people in middle America to stop watching like old reruns of Roseanne when they should be watching Pose, So I think
or Veneno.
Right. More programming, which is what people like Black queer people in these industries are working to do. And hopefully there's a trickle down effect, but there is no necessarily it won't happen, but we're trying.
All right. Jon, did you want to say something, or are you ready for the lightning?
I'll just say that I am, I'll just say briefly, I am less worried about the algorithm for people's entertainment than I am worried about how people are served news, and the kind of news and how the news is sorted for people. Not because I think there's like this idea, we talk about being polarized. I actually think that word is wrong. In reality, there is kind of a vast firmament of left and center left and even center right media and news that reaches tons and tons of people. And then there's an increasing silo for right-wing talk, right-wing conversation, right-wing misinformation that Fox News and Ben Shapiro and Facebook have kind of built this little satellite that's moving further and further away from Earth. And to me, I'm less worried about reaching people on the margins than what we do. I'm less worried about the ways in which, I'm more worried about what the ways in which that exposure slowly pulls people into this narrow band of misinformation than I am about like kind of other pieces of the ways in which our content is sorting. And I think the bigger question for me is, what do we do? How do we stop people from getting sucked into that orbit, right? Like, how do we get people on the margins? Because you don't start as QAnon. You don't start there. You start over here. You slowly get over there. And we need to think about interventions that pull people into the reality part of the internet.
Yeah. Okay, lightning round. So this is the nature of a lightning round is short answers, but I'm going to begin the first question with a little backstory, which is that when I was discussing with Jason Laney of SMYAL, who made this whole thing happen, thank you, Jason, the questions for the lightning round. Question 1 was favorite Real Housewives franchise. And he was like, are they going to have a favorite Real Housewives franchise? And I was like, I'm pretty sure they are, but if not, they can answer favorite reality TV show. So number one, what's your favorite Real Housewives franchise?
Atlanta. Young Black woman. Nene Leakes is hilarious.
Love it. Tell me that one.
Everything. There we go.
I'll say this. I'll say two things. It's Great British Bake Off. I don't know the Real Housewives, but I've decided that Glenn Greenwald seeks out so much drama that he's the Real Housewife of Substack. And that's a patented new phrase. So he's my favorite Real Housewife.
Love it. Okay. Worst thing on social media?
People.
Humans. I don't know, bots. Yeah.
It's that GIF. It's that GIF of that Real Housewife doing a spit take. You know what I'm talking about? If people think it's Jennifer Lawrence, it's not Jennifer Lawrence. You know what I'm talking about?
I know the one you mean. I don't know who she is. I didn't even know she was a Real Housewife.
Does anyone know what I'm talking about? Please know if you know what I'm talking about.
It's clearly ubiquitous, but I've never seen a couple.
Okay.
Okay, Aida, apart from people, what's the worst?
I feel like logistics wise, I'm really annoyed by people taking real people's songs and then calling it original audio, and then you can't find who was the songwriter of that. That's the most frustrating thing for me. It's IP.
That's a deep
for
cut.
me, it's IP.
It's IP. It's IP.
Okay, if you had a gift certificate for Cameo, what celeb would you buy a cameo from?
I'm making Solange just say my name into the camera a million times.
Good answer.
Without breaking eye contact.
Good answer.
I'm gonna say, I don't know if he's on there. I don't know what made me think of this. Bob Newhart.
You know, those two answers are a perfect encapsulation of the two of you. Right.
Just think it's like, what are the odds I'm gonna get to meet Bob Newhart in the next couple of years, you know?
Yeah, fair. What were you most looking forward to doing after you got fully vaccinated?
Oh, the safe for work answer.
I was just gonna say, like, choose your audience. There are people here watching.
Meeting new people. Honestly, meeting new people. I had moved to LA, and then 2 months later, the world shut down, and I did a lot of work just right here at this office. And I'm just excited to meet new people and make new enemies.
Very wholesome answer.
Until I said the last part. All right, you were too soon.
Wait, and you make new people and what?
And make new enemies.
That's good. That's pretty wholesome too.
I'll say an escape room.
Okay.
It's like a lightning round. It's totally subjective, and yet all my answers are wrong.
Fine.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I want to do an escape room with Bob Newhart. It's weird. You're super weird.
I'm here for it.
Isn't that the fun of it? There's no rules.
Like, it's not Mad Libs. It's a lightning round.
Giving you my answer.
I support you. I support you.
Other than a Crooked Media podcast, what podcast would you recommend?
One of my coworkers, Kid Fury, is in the writer's room for Rap Shit. And of course, The Read is a wonderful podcast you should listen to with Crystal West and Kid Fury. Hilarious, biting, Black, very interesting.
There's a Vox podcast called Unexplainable about questions in science that don't have answers, and I love it.
Okay, and the last question in the lightning round, pandering to the crowd, what is your top reason to support queer youth?
I'm still a queer youth, and I will be until the moment I die.
I'll give you a sincere answer, which is, I was thinking about what Aida said about, representing, showing empathy and living and, showing up in our own personal lives. And I do think something's happening now, and I think actually the conservatives got it first, which is, I think the movement for gay rights started this. The movement for trans rights is continuing this. But like, we're not just in a reckoning about the acceptance of trans people, but they're at the vanguard of a fight over the salience and importance and meaning of gender itself that can't be separated from culture, and that both challenges for acceptance in norms and violation of those norms. And I think that is incredibly important and really valuable. And young people are leading it. They are not just gaining acceptance into a binary. Obviously, they are subverting and causing people to question how they adhere to that binary in ways large and small. And I think that is transformative. And I think the reason I say conservatives got it first is because they understood how dangerous it is to a certain way of seeing the world, to see masculinity and femininity challenged in that way. And I think we will look back on this as the beginning of something really important led by young people.
Aida and Jon, you have both been voices of sanity during a crazy time, and the fact that you shared your time with us this evening means so much to us. Thank you. I wish I could give you a big vaccinated hug, but please just imagine I'm hugging you from afar from my little guest bedroom NPR studio here in Washington, D.C. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Ari.
having
Thank you,
us.
everybody. So happy to be here.